you already. Good afternoon again. We're ready to begin session 2, and this one is moderated by Dr. Mesa Jones, and I hope that I don't embarrass her in saying that, and actually just earlier, yesterday and today, we had as our Phi Beta Kappa scholar, Hazel Carvey. And I can tell Professor Rankin that Professor Carvey was heartbroken that she is missing you. She had a train at 1:55, and she thought, I can't believe that we're trains passing in the night. So what Professor Carvey said was, that Meta Jones is just dead on, isn't she? She's just dead on. And I said, yes, I was not kidding when I told you that there isn't a better critic of poetry in the country. I don't think it's an exaggeration. She may be embarrassed by it because she's also incredibly humble, and her students are like nodding their heads, absolutely yes. So I will now invite Dr. Jones to the podium to introduce some students in her class and who will be presenting for this session. Meta Jones.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams, even for the embarrassment. I'll wait. My students in my class know I wait till everyone's seated, so we can give them, as well as Miss Claudia Rankin, the attention she deserves. Fantastic. So the title of our session is called Seeing Citizenship, Understanding Claudia Rankin, a Bio-Poetic and Ekphrastic Exploration. To give a little bit of context, since our panel is different than the panel that precedes us and the panel that follows us, the students were given 2 different prompts. One was a prompt of doing scholarly and critical undergraduate research to find out more not only about citizenship, but also in the book, but also about Claudia Rankin's long and illustrious career working through poetry. The other is that students were given prompts to try to see not only the way Rankin engages and encourages us to see, but also to try to see anew and beyond in the kind of in her aspect of ekphrasis and exploration and citizen. And so ekphrasis is just a fancy, formal, technical term to talk about the way that art feeds on art, or the way that poetry, in this context, Rankin's poetry, looks at visual art, visual mediums, visual scenes, and transforms them anew. So first, without further ado, I'm going to call forward Brittany Robinson. The title of her piece is Masculinity So Fragile. Welcome, Brittany.
Good afternoon. My piece is based on pages 102 and 103. Okay. Boys will be boys being, boys feeling. Black boy, do you feel, or can you? Who do you love? Do you love me, your mom, your girl, your boy, yourself, or them? Blue boy, who do you fear? Who do you fear? Is it me, those other boys, God, yourself, or them? Boy blue, when I see you, know that I value you. I value you for you. I feel for you, worry for you, worry about you, and what I want in return is for you to do the same for me. Thank you.
The color of my skin is, I'm still here. Citizen, prestigious, poet, playwright, professor, conscious, visual, simulacra, saturated, lover of language and its ability to enact and create, who is invested in keeping present the forgotten bodies, bringing the dead forward and keeping reality present, who learns to see through art and artistry, who sees past the beauty and into the power of art, who believes art speaks in narrative and mood, who observes people, collects truths, reflects on overarching implications, tracks moments, and archives disruptions, who evokes memory, visibility, mortality, and intimacy, who fears that Black bodies are living within their own corpses, that Black life is marked by mourning, who is interested in the quotidian negotiation of racism, disparity, and macroaggressions, who would like us to communicate, to be flawed differently, to recognize the humanity in one another, resident of reality, hope, liberation, and California, belongs to here and now, Pomona, Jamaica, loved by the NAACP, National Book Critics Circle, New York Times, Howard University, Claudia Rankin. The second piece is my ekphrastic response to the art piece entitled Uncertain Yet Reserved on pages 86 and 87 of Citizen, an American Lyric. Did you see their faces? Black absorbs and reflects all the colors, and rainbows keep Black bodies full, waterlogged, buoyant. The levee did not burst to break them free, to return them to earth and soil. It broke to expose the blues and muddy the yellows. Seeing requires light, color. What can you see when night covers your eyes? Black absorbs all the colors, especially itself. Can you call it Black if it is every color at once, even you? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Canyons of Consciousness, Miss Claudia, Lady of Lyric, Master of this tongue, awarded, appreciated, calm, considering, graceful, intense, writing about things everyone thinks but only some are brave enough to explore. Plus she does it with grace. Lover of liberated thought, lover of nuance, lover of expression and therapeutic art, who feels emotion as primarily as human capacity allows her to. Feels like participating in culture while critiquing it poses no paradox, neither legitimate enough nor grand enough to stop nobody. She's an American citizen, writing American lyric, yet she needs to title her poetry American. As in, don't get it twisted, it's in the title. You may not refuse nor opt out. Who also needs to invent her own style of poetry, because why contort yourself to fit the format of someone's page, let alone imagination? Who fears that despite everything, we will remain disconnected? Who gives immortality to moments we'd rather forget because they're ashamed of their presence and we're tired of the pain that they bring? And wouldn't life be rounder and wider if we could explore our own potential outside of the chokehold of oppression? Who makes poetry and prose seem as distant and connected as South and North? Where is either, really? Tell me, who doesn't inhabit the space in between? Who feels haunted by the space in between, the world and her? Who would like to behold the miracle of complexity, the complexity of life and lives of those who spend their days damned? No, their realities aren't fair, but they are legitimate. Resident of the home of the free, belongs to one of its territories, loved by her kin, be it fictive, and by Howard University, and by this great nation. Oh, to be decorated in Black, Miss Rankin. and the title of my critical analysis is Elevating Lyric and Investigations of Truth. Claudia Rankin's contribution to contemporary Black poetry manifests in both the form and the function of her work. In terms of form, her lyrical prose is written as a stream of consciousness, often recounting personal experiences or relaying very specific interactions. The lyrical aspect of this format integrates the action of the situation, her thoughts as the action progresses, and commentary on this reality, however emotional, all within the same moment. I hope to duplicate this form in my bio poem by allowing my personal artistic and explanatory comments to exist within the lines of the poem itself. Stylistically, I employ paragraph format, as seen in Citizen and American Lyric, among other works of Ms. Rankin. Visually, this form does not use line breaks, one of the most immediate visual characteristics of traditional poetry, further creating the experience of a stream of consciousness. In terms of function, Ms. Rankin's poetry investigates truth as a byproduct of reality. In a review of Ms. Rankin's poetry collection, The End of the Alphabet, Michael J. Carter talks about Ms. Rankin's dialogue, calling it, quote, idiosyncratic. To me, this label suggests that both thought and reflection are deeply subjective. Rankin's poetry works to represent truth, mostly painful truths, in a holistic way, simply off the number of angles that she provides. In Citizen, there are numerous, brief instances of racist commentary in situations that meticulously construct a 360-degree viewpoint of microaggression. In Don't Let Me Be Lonely, Ms. Rankin tackles the vast conception of beauty and emotion, emotions such as loneliness and despair. I attempt to emphasize truth in this bio poem by refusing to simplify complex concepts, such as Ms. Rankin's attempt to immortalize a single moment, and by exposing paradoxes, such as wearing an American identity while struggling for liberation within this very nation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Miss Claudia Rankin, brown woman, hopeful, faithful, that emergence from the ashes is abound. She is intransigently trenchant, a painter of words, roaring loud, all that is to be said, unapologetically. And still, Jamaican memories create smiles of joy and freedom. That there, that here, on a bus, you are seen, and not erased by invisibility of mirrored walls that separate reality from reflections. So now it is being collected. We want our 2/5 remaining status, an unapologetic anger card, without a reality that Casper's ghostly place in society somehow is seen more than brown bodies. The state of emergency is always a state of emergence, and the when an obstacle surrenders laughter. For the white gaze that views the brown eyes with blue daggers, I don't see the problem. I would like the rights to the right to say I and I be here, be seen, be a citizen. An American citizen currently residing in California, a proud Jamaican heritage, lover of Howard University, Ms. Claudia Rankin. The title of my analysis is The Emergence. Quote from Dred Scott versus Sanford, Chief Justice Taney on the opinion of the court in 1857. There are 2 clauses in the Constitution which point directly and specifically to the Negro race as a separate class of persons, and show clearly that They were not regarded as a portion of a people or citizens of the government then formed. It is obvious that they were not even in the minds of the framers of the Constitution when they were conferring special rights and privileges upon the citizens of a state in every part of the Union. Indeed, when we look to the condition of this race in the several states at the time, it is impossible to believe that these rights and privileges were intended to be extended to them. Citizen. In Citizen, Ms. Claudia Rankin explores what it means to be invisible, almost ghost-like, in a society that deems all lives matter, and in the echoes, all gazes are equal. Accept the gaze of those whose world pulls wool over eyes and highlights your invisibility, or your lack of feeling and humanity. The use of second-person you shapes this gaze and draws the reader in as a character. You are forced into the seat as an actor, as the actor. And unlike typical novel or poetic fashion, you are transformed. Ms. Rankin suggests that even the use of I is a privilege of sorts. Your I declarations may not always be received by society depending upon your gaze. Later in Citizen, much like her other works, robust language, beautifully expressed with words that fit like perfect shoes, are truly representative of Ms. Rankin's works. One can find honesty and a nakedness of prose that is unlike any other. A hopeful writer, Ms. Rankin's determination to expose ills within society is also her declaration for its impeding emergence. I did not come to this realization until later reflection after reading the work Citizen in particular. I largely found echoes ringing in my ears stating, I am not the audience for this book. Yet somehow I was. A solemn reminder of reality, I had seen no hope in reading a book that writes my everyday experience. It was like a broken record repeating the same lines over and over. Yet, in my reflection, I was reminded that there is hope. And that this conversation, this recording, is a part of the path on the way up and out. It is hope. It is a tongue vibrating words off a sheet into thought. And those who read are changed forever. It is in Ms. Rankin's works you can come fully as you are, who you are, wholly and wholly represented. There is nothing to hide. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
A prose poem overheard in the moonlight. Miss Claudia, a prose poem overheard in the moonlight. Shattered, scattered, relinked, lingering. Lover of Dickinson and Rich and the mess of creation, who feels like it's her personal mission to keep those stories present. Feels, like Edwidge, Ka and calls that the immanent herself, like the making of the thing is the truth. Who wants to make us see the black child knocked to the ground, wants to create the field of the encounter, to understand that there are two worlds out there, two Americas out there to be considered. Who fears the inevitability of black bodies inside dead bodies? Who gives us space to inhabit moments our humanity has been squeezed out of? Gives us space for all that is wrong in 5, 7, and 5. Because white men can't police their imaginations, black men are dying. Us to speak to the strangers we meet at the bus stop and Starbucks. Space to move on without leaving behind. To breathe, you have to create a truth. Who wants to prevent misunderstanding? Resident of the opening between her and her. belongs to all the boundaries and needn't ask for permission to cross any of them. Translator of temporal static, narrator of untold stories. And this is my ekphrastic response to Wangechi Mutu's Sleeping Heads. It's on page 147 of Citizen. Sleeping Heads in Ekphrasis. You are you even before you. Grow into understanding you. Are not anyone, worthless, not worth you. Flesh of thy flesh, bone still soft, fresh, images of your less. Etched into the gray matter, stretched to bursting brain, matters, only to flesh like thy flesh. Skin like a quilt of scraps from other worthless skin quilts, ripped apart with no attention paid to seams, where you might have just unraveled if you were just left to be. Hand cradles occipital lobe, new hand cradles chin, forces chewing. Old hand wrapping, crushing throat with your umbilical auxiliary cord. Gray hand covered in gray matter, brain matter from behind the eye, releasing the scene for others to see. A voice sounds from your open temporal lobe, since the mouth they put on you is full of the pieces of the worthless bodies they feed you, telling you to abort the mission of understanding who you are shaping up to be. Aborted fetus that did not die, not worth enough to be. And you've always been a mass of stitched flesh and soft bone. Thank you.
Okay, that was a lot. A lot of just fantastic work. And I thank you all. I thank you for my, I should replace my CV with your bio. As an overall, I won't go through every single thing, but there were a couple things that struck me before I answer the question. I mean, one of them had to do with Layla June West. I love that, I mean, this is idiosyncratic, but I love that your last name is West and that you talked about territories in your piece and the location of North and South, and so it was almost as if your own identity was, in a sense, guiding the gaze, so and pulling the landscape forward. So I really appreciated that in your piece. In Angel's piece, the thing that really struck me was your final line. Do you remember what it was?
My final line?
Yeah.
In the Ekphrastic piece or in the bio-poem?
It might have been the bio-poem.
The final line in the bio-poem is your name. The final line in the Ekphrastic piece is, can you call it black if it is every color at once, even you?
Right. And I loved that when you said it was HUE, that it pulled the color out as a constructive thing. And that there was an automatic disassociation, actually, between the pronoun you and the color you as a you. And that happened instantaneously in that moment. So I was jealous, actually. That was really fantastic. And in Brittany's piece, I really took to heart the exchange, and it seemed to me a call to action, a call to empathy between Black men and Black women, and understanding that despite the institutional cultural pressures that exist
that we still have a responsibility to each other as human beings. And so I thought that was really necessary. And LaTanya, I like that you pulled forward the right to the eye, and talked so well about the shaping of the gaze, which I think is important on both sides. I mean, in terms of our aspirational thinking, in terms of the shaping of the gaze from the outside, and our own struggle and the necessary activity of reshaping the gaze for the self. So I thought that was wonderful. And then Chandra, this is where I'm going to go. I'm going to use Chandra to move into the questions, because I thought that this idea of the space to inhabit, the space our humanity has squeezed out of, overall led me to thinking about Bell Hook's notion that the margin can be a space of radical thinking. That even as we recognize the ways in which the society marginalizes women, people of color, queer people, keep going, there is inside of those spaces an alive culture, a vibrant culture, a culture that is made, a culture that actually is shaped and owned by the inhabitants of that margin. And that is also something to value. And that brings me to what methods have you adapted to counter white arrogance? I think in that video, I don't know if you guys have seen it, of the Trump rally, where that amazing woman with clearly very good reading taste is reading Citizen. One of the things I loved about her was the fact that while he was talking to her, you saw her listening to him. I mean, she actually was like, "What do you have to say to me?" And then she was like, "No, thank you. No, I don't need that kind of guidance. Thank you very much." And then she did that head shake. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? And which was a fantastic moment of throwing shade, which I also appreciated. And that went by in the split second of the moment. Just like, no. My feeling about that was that moment had to do with ascribing a narrative of good behavior as a methodology of silencing. It's like, it's impolite for you to be reading while he's speaking. But it's not impolite for him to be speaking about the annihilation of Mexican people. That's not impolite. But it's impolite for you to turn away from a discourse that eradicates members of our citizenry. So, at that moment, it turned whatever she did, whether it was taking out Citizen or not, her refusal to partake and the demonstrating of that refusal without disrupting anybody else's ability to listen if they choose to listen, seemed to me a great example of a new kind of activism. So she's my new hero, I have to say. And in terms of memory, whether black bodies exist as memory, I think all bodies exist as memory. I think that as our culture is formed, I don't think it's useful to feel that the history of slavery and racism is held any less in the body of Thomas Jefferson than it is in the body of Harriet Jacobs, or in my body versus David Foster Wallace, let's say, just to pull somebody out. I think that the tendency for our culture to ascribe to whiteness the privilege of forgetting history is part of our problem as a culture. But there would be no racism without those white bodies. So our history is bound up in American history, which is bound up in the bodies of white people. And so we're in it together. It's not my story versus your story, it's our story. And until we begin to understand it as our story, and until everyone begins to feel accountable, I mean, what would have been extremely exciting is, and this is not in comparison, it's also, is if somebody in that audience who was white also said, this is intolerable. That people of color don't own and aren't accountable always to checking the inhumanity of the moment. And which is not to say that, white people don't show up sometimes. But, that's, to me, that sense of being culpable and responsible, and that it's not just part of the story of our living to be corrective in those moments. And then the final question had to do with our contemporary events. And I have to say, I was glad that question was asked, because it brings up this issue that I think is incredibly important to us. The role of social media right now. Did you all see that movie with Steve Jobs and Apple? I don't know, you have an Apple. We all have these phones on our cameras on our phones, and we all have access to social media, and we have in our lifetime seen how we have the power to bring into mainstream media our own stories. And that's happening because we are recording them. We are sending them out on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram. And they're trending, and we're understanding that what happens in our communities matter. And suddenly, what happens on, last night, that woman at the Trump rally was on Rachel Maddow's show. So we now have the ability to control the mainstream media, or at least to be inside that conversation. And that's a powerful moment, and one that I think we, now that we've entered into it, really need to understand how much it's available to us. And I'll end by telling you a little story. I drove up here yesterday from Charlottesville, from UVA. In the car, I was picked up by a car service at my hotel at UVA, and the car had windows that were blacked out, so you couldn't see me in the back seat. The driver of the car was a black man. We were pulled over between DC and Charlottesville twice, and we were followed much of the way. And when the policeman came up to the car window, the first time he said, "Look, we're being followed. I'm going to pull into this gas station." So he pulled into the gas station, and then the policeman pulled into the gas station. And he got out of his police car and he came over and he started talking about how the guy was speeding. But the guy wasn't speeding because I was watching the speedometer the entire time, because we both knew the cops were there. We passed maybe 5 of them. And so I thought, God, why wasn't I filming the speedometer the whole time? And so then he's, yes, you were speeding. No, I wasn't. Yes, you were. But then he sees me, and then all of a sudden I'm the witness. So he leaves. And so we get back into the cab, and he starts driving, and we drive for about another 30, 35 minutes, and another policeman comes and pulls it. This time we're pulled over. And he says, "Oh, look, there's another policeman. Oh my God, he's pulling us over." He pulls us over, and the guy the windows are closed, he doesn't see me. And he comes up to the window and he's enraged. I mean, he's already having a fight that doesn't exist, And so he's yelling at the guy, "You were blah, 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 and you was, blah, blah, blah." And then the taxi driver puts down his window and he puts down my window in the back, in the same gesture. So both windows come down. And the guy sees me, and he's just asked him for his registration and license. And when he sees me, he just walks back to his car. He doesn't collect the registration, he doesn't collect the license, because the whole thing was made up. And he realizes I would be able to say no. And it wasn't even the pretense of let's go through this and then I won't give you a ticket. It was just he walked back to his car. And when he put the window down, I reached into my bag and I pulled out my phone. As if I was going to record, but I don't think I was like, how do you even record this? I don't know. But the idea was the gesture of, we are now going to surveillance. We are entering into a moment of surveillance. And so he left. So that idea that social media, that we have with us always, as long as we have our phones, we have a method of surveillance. I think is really important in terms of how we enter into events. It's also a sad way to have to live, that we are never fully inside the moment and always thinking about the documenting of the moment. But so be it, right? So be it. Thank you.